Hello, this video is going to cover working with identity. It's an extension of Entity Framework and it's going to allow us to password protect part of our web application and create a user authentication and registration system. Okay, so to get going, we've got a starter repository here on GitHub, and I've opened up the database via a Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. I've got the films database from a previous movie in there, and that's going to be used in this starter repository here as well. So in Visual Studio, I'm going to clone that repository. So just grab that address there and clone it. I've probably got something called that already, so let me just call that demo. Let's clone. Okay, so we'll go away and clone that project. I'll fire this up so we can initially look at it, and you'll see it's a familiar project if you've been following these tutorials, based around the films database to give us some content to be able to do CRUDing, creating, reading, updating and deleting, and it's MVC. Okay, so there's our project populating nicely over there. Let's fire it up. So we'll go to debug and start debugging, and it should go into localhost for us. So localhost is firing up, so we'll be able to have a quick look at what the application looks like. So here we go, we've got films, and we've got a list of all the films here, and we can drill into them, get more details. We've got a search feature, and we built CMS in a previous tutorial. When I go to that, it's currently open and anybody can use it. So the aim of this tutorial is to secure this so that you have to have an appropriate login to get into the system. Okay, so I've got a tutorial guide to help you along here. So we're going to do the authentication setup. So this is an extension of Entity Framework, so we need to make sure that we've got the appropriate packages loaded. So let me just close down the localhost for now. Now I've already done this, but what you'll need to do is under Tools, you will need to go to NuGet Packet Manager, Manage NuGet Packages for Solution, and in here make sure that you load in the Identity Entity Framework Core, and make sure the version matches whether you're using 3.1 or 5, as we're kind of in a transitional period between the two at the moment. So I've loaded that in and it's available to my application. I'll see that through dependencies here as well if you weren't sure whether it was there or not. Okay, so make sure that you've done that. What identity is going to give us is it's going to create what's known as users and roles. So user is a person using our application, a role dictates what they can do, and for both of those we're going to create also have a DB context that's going to allow us to communicate with the database so that we can update the data in the tables that the identity is going to create for us for managing users and roles. So first thing we're going to do is to keep things tidy. I'm going to create a new folder, and which I'm going to call security. So let's add a new folder and call this security, and that's where I'm going to place the majority of the interesting bits and pieces. So in there I'm going to create add a new class, and this is going to be my app identity user.cs, and that should generate this for me. So we're using the identity project, we've got our app identity there. Now what identity will do is it will create a user for me, and it will do it with kind of standard properties like email and password, but we can choose to extend that if we like, because we can add in our own properties, such as, so I'm suggesting one here, a full name and birth date. What we do need to do is make sure that this does actually extend the identity class, so we need to make sure that that is in there like so, and that would require us to make sure that we loaded in using ASP core identity, so we'll bring that in as well. and then we can add these two, and this is just optional. You wouldn't need to do this unless you particularly wanted to, but just to prove you, we can extend the base user with some additional properties. Right, so I'll save that. That's our user ready for scaffolding. It's going to use that to create a table in a second. We then need a role as well. So under security, let's right click and add, and we'll add in another class. So this one is going to be app identity role.cs. Going to be similar to the previous one in that this is going to extend the identity role, which is part of the framework. So again, when I put that in, it's going to prompt me to make sure that I've got the correct packages in there. So let's extend that out. Great. And let's customize that by adding a role description in there as well, like so. Okay, that looks good. Let's save that. So again, this is just an optional extension. Roles are going to have built-in properties, and we can just choose to extend them if we want to. Right, now we're going to build an app identity DB context. This is going to be our conduit. This is going to how we're going to communicate with the tables that are created for the users and the roles, just like when we created a DB context for the films database, which forms the basis of this application. So we'd already previously under models created an app DB context, but this is going to be one purely for the purposes of identity. So let's create a new class under here, and this is going to be our app identity DB context. Make sure I get that typed in correctly. So in that goes. Now I'm going to lift in this logic here, because this is going to use, it's going to create an identity DB context with our user and our role. So we'll place that inside of there, like so. It's not aware what identity is, so let me flag that up for it. So I'll bring in the framework, like so, and we should also bring in entity framework core as well. So in the tutorial notes, there's the other one that we need. Let's bring those two in, and we should be good to go. Okay, so that gives us our DB context. Now, like with the other DB context that was created for the base version of this application, what we need to do is make sure that is available to other parts of our application through this thing called dependency injection. So that would mean that in startup here, what I need to do is configure services in order to make that DB context available as a service, so we can use it via dependency injection. So we've already got the one in there for the main DB context for the main database. What we're going to do here, so that's already there, so we're going to extend it by adding these two in here, which add our new DB context as a service for dependency injection, but also add identity, user and role as well as a service. So those two can go into here like so. Now it won't know what app identity is, so we do need to tell it to bring in using project security, where it would find that, and now it's happy with that. Great. The other thing we can do in startup as well, again in configure services, is this system uses sessions, which means they use cookies. So it provides a cookie session ID, and so we're going to set this our cookie up, and we're going to, in the options for this, we're going to point users at a sign-in page for them to log in if that's required, and we're going to point them at an access denied page as well if we decide that they don't have access to part of our application. So again, that's going to go in configure services like so. And the other thing that's mentioned in the tutorial notes is do make sure that down here you've got these within the configure method. So this is the middleware pipeline. We've got user authentication and user authorization both in there already, so that should be good to go. Okay, right, so we're now in a position where we can use the Scaffolding Identity framework users to hopefully build these tables here. So I currently just have my dummy films table in there, but I'm going to use Entity Framework to set up all these tables that will manage the identity, the authorization authentication for me. So let's go to Tools, let's go to NuGet Packet Manager, let's open up the console down here, and I'm going to run this first command here to add a migration. So I'll add a migration in there. Notice that it's got a flag of context, and we're migrating this app identity context. We don't want to do the application context for the films, that's already done. So off we go, it starts building, and fingers crossed we get a build succeeded. And so we should now have up in migrations here the necessary files. So you'll see if you dig around in there, it's going to build loads of tables. There's the roles, there's the users. So all this stuff it gave us, we added in a couple of our own, remember, but all of that's been built for us through the scaffolding. We do need to run an update database to actually apply that scaffolding to our database. So away that goes, build started, fingers crossed, build succeeded. And if I go over to here now, it always seems slow to refresh, but so it's not showing me the tables there, but usually what I'm finding is if you go to View and you go to SQL Server Object Explorer, this seems to be quicker to update. I go to Databases, there's my Films database, there's my tables, and in a second it should populate. There you go, there's all the tables that it's going to use for the identity framework. Great. So okay, so that's the fiddly setup bit done. We can now start building some pages following the familiar controller views for model view controller setup. So let's start with the registration page. So starting off with the registration page, we are going to do, first of all, we're going to set up a model, and this model is going to help build us a form where we can ask for the username, a password, we'll ask them to compare it, and then provide an email. And those are two custom properties of full name and birth date. So I'm going to create this as a model inside of our models folder. So I'll go to models, let's create inside of there, add a new class. So I'll call this register.cs, and just going to select what was in there by default and paste in the code snippet. So there's no great mileage in you typing all that in yourselves, and let's just change that so it matches the namespace. Right, great, so we've got the model set up now. Let's then look at setting up a controller. So to keep things nice and tidy, I'm going to create a brand new controller in controllers that I'm going to call security controller. So let's add in a controller, and we'll call this security controller.cs. Okay, so there's our security controller. There's a kind of default setting, but here is a more expanded version. This is going to create private read-only variables for the user, the role, and whether they've something called sign-in manager. So it's going to manage the application for us, and we've got a constructor here that's receiving those as parameters to set those up. We're going to have a register page that's going to call a view. We'll create a view, and then down here we've got what happens when the value someone tries to register by posting through. So we're protecting against CSRF. It's a post. We're checking if the model is valid, and then we're going to create a brand new user I'm going to call a manager in our system. So you could refine this to for the purposes of your application. So let's copy that and let's go over to our controller here and we'll paste that in. We might have some namespace issues to sort out. So up here, let's change that to identity project. Okay, and then save that. And we need to change this up here as well to load in our models and our security so that they should disappear as issues. Great, okay, we'll save that. So first of all, let's say we're going to deal with registering. So down here, we'll create a view now in views security. So we've got security controller. We need to go to views and create a folder. So add in a folder called security. And inside of that, let's add in a view. So I'll add in a view called empty razor. And we'll call it register.cshtml. Okay, so I'm going to create this register razor page. So let's copy that and we're going to replace that. So what we've got there is a form. There's one or two tag helpers, the SP4 for example, but effectively it's just a HTML form. It's got a method of post. And so it's going to post through to that post action that we set up in the controller. Right, so we can save that. And now at this point we can test it. So it's going to allow us to create a user. So I'm going to start debugging. And it should fire up. Right, so here we go. Now I'll need to go to that hard-coded path at the moment. So if I go to security register, it should come up with a register form. And I'm going to create a user. So let's call it a user called Marty. I'm going to put a password in there. Let's just put this in Notepad so I can remember it. I have a habit of forgetting passwords I use on demos. I'm going to use this as my password. Why am I going to use that? Well, Identity has got built-in settings such that it will require me to have a password that's so many letters, I think more than 6. It's got to have a number in it, and it's got to have a mixed case. So let's just show you in the documentation. So it's got to have an uppercase character, lowercase character, a digit, and a non-alpha numeric, and 6 characters long at least. That's the default. You can, through the documentation, you'll see that you can change that if you want. Okay, right, so that's my fantastic password. Let's find the application again now. It's here somewhere. There it is. Right, so I'll put that as my password. I have to confirm it. And let's put in a test email and put in a full name. And then we can put in a birthday. Oof, would be better if that started earlier, but you get the idea. It won't go back far enough for me. I'll do, let's say that. Right, and then I can create. So what that should do, fingers crossed, it should go away. That's going to throw an error in that it can't find the sign-in page, but you can see it has tried to find the sign-in page. So let me switch the application off. And if I go to the users table now, so I go to view, SQL server object, and I go to net users, and I open that up, and I ask to view the data. It should have me in there. There I am. There's my email, and there's my password, which has been hashed. That's one-way encryption. I can't possibly know what that was. That's why I stuck it in Notepad, because I'll forget it. Right, so we've registered a single user there. Let's now allow them to, let's block some pages by securing them. So next up, we're going to secure pages. So we're going to create in the security controller, going to create an action called access denied. So we'll find our security controller. We've got the stuff in there for registering already. So underneath that, I'm going to add in this additional action here, which is going to be an access denied one. And what we'll need to do for that is also create a view. So in security here, let's create a view. So we'll create that empty view, and we'll call this access denied.cs HTML. And I'm just going to put this bit of HTML in there. That's all we really need for now. So we'll get a message telling them there's a problem. Okay, right, so in order to secure the application now, what we can do is in the CMS controller, which is one of the reasons we separated out controllers in an earlier tutorial, is that we can add this authorize, and only for roles of manager we can give them access to the CMS. So inside of here, before the class, we'll add in this. So let's pop that in there, and I'll save that. And we've now secured that part of the application. We will need to make sure that the CMS controller is aware of identity, which it is in there. So I think we're good to go. So let's test this out now. So what we're testing at this point is whether we can get into the CMS without logging in, which we shouldn't be able to do. So let's test it. So here we are, localhost has fired up. I'm going to try and get into the CMS, and it won't let me in. And again, you can see that redirect to sign in. So I can't get in even if I was. I do need to sign in order to get in. I am registered, but I haven't signed in. So that's what we'll do next. So we're going to create the sign in next. So you'll see there's a familiar pattern setting up here. We're going to create a model. So inside of models, let's create a new, so we'll add in a class of signin.cs, and this will inform what values we want from the user when they sign in. So we want their username and their password, and we've got the option to create a remember me setup. So let's copy that, and we'll go to our sign in, and let's add that in as the class. Okay, oops, sorry. There we go. And let's just change the identity, pick up the correct namespace there. Perfect, so we'll save that. So we've now got a sign-in model. And let's go to our controller. So we'll go to our security controller, and we'll create both that would be the get, just give me the view, or a post with a CSRF protection. So it's going to be posted, check the model is valid, and sign them in. So this is what Identity Framework gives me, all this ability to sign in. And we'll redirect them into the CMS if they're successful. If not, we'll give them an error message. So that's going to go in our security controller. So we've got those two tasks now, two actions, one for the get and one for the post. So we'll save that. And then we need to create the view. So in the view, let's go to security again. Let's right click, let's add a view, which we're going to, so it's an empty razor view in this case, and it's going to be signin.cs.html. And we've just got this little bit of HTML here. There's a bit of razor in there as well in terms of tag helpers. So we've got a form. We're asking for the username and password. It's going to go to an action of sign in, control of security, and it's using the CMS layout template. Okay, right, so let's save that, and we should be able to test that now. And as we test this, you should be able to see when you successfully sign in that it creates a cookie, and that cookie is being used to control the session, which is controlling the whole login process. So off we go, let's fire up localhost. So here we are, let's try and go into the CMS. It bounced me to the sign in, so I can't get into there. So let me sign in. And this is where I'd hopefully remembered my password correctly. And let's try and get in. And I mustn't have remembered the password correctly. Well, it proves it is secure. So let me try type. Well, it should be in here, shouldn't it? So let's grab that. There we go. So I'm now securely into the CMS. And I can do all the coding. Great. Okay. Now if I right click and I inspect, if I go to application, I'll be able to see the cookie that's controlling this, which is this identity one here. Okay, so that's setting up the session, which is allowing me access to here and giving me access to all the bits and pieces in those tables created by identity. Now, to prove that's the case, if I delete that, that would in effect log me out, because if I try to go anywhere within the application now, it's going to turf me back out to sign in. Now, deleting the cookie like that is great and it proves the point, but that's not really what a user would want to do if they want to sign out. They'd want a sign out option, and that's what we'll do next. So the final piece of the puzzle is to create a sign out option. So what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to go to the layout. So if you go to shared CMS under views, this is the view template that's been used by the CMS, and I'm going to add in this little bit of logic here, and this is going to display to users their username when they've logged in, a welcome message, and it's also got a HTML form there which is going to call the sign out action in the security controller if they choose to sign out. So we'll add that into the CMS. That's another reason to have different templates down here. And then in the security controller, what we can do is we can add in an appropriate action called sign out. It's HTTP post, it's authorized, it's got the CServe token and sign out. And sign out async is part of identity. So let's stick that in the security controller down here. So we'll stick that in. There we go. Let's save that. And let's fire up our application for the last time. Okay, so here we are again. Let's go to CMS. It's asking me to log in. So let me do that. See if I can remember my password, which I can't. Don't know what I'm typing wrong there. Anyway, here we go. So it does prove it's secure. So in we go, sign in. We're in this time, and then that's what we get by amending the template. We get this sign out option. That's going to effectively sign us out. When I click on that's going to call that action. So click on this, and out we go. So we can't get back in because it's secure. Okay, so there you go. There's a brief introduction to using identity. There's lots more that you can do with that, so I recommend you have a look at the Microsoft documentation to take it further. Thanks for watching.